Welcome to this Blender tutorial. My name is Kent Trammell, and today we're going to be looking at modeling an ornamental shield with Blender 2.8. That's right, this is the first tutorial I've ever done with 2.8. It's in alpha stage, so it is early, and before you grab your torches and pitchforks about me doing a tutorial so early, let's just chill out about that. And at this point in time, knowing that things are probably going to be changed, let's just dive in and get our feet wet. Why not? We're getting pretty close to official release, and modeling this shield started for me as an exercise in acclimating myself to this new version of Blender. And I want to share this workflow with you. We'll also be talking about modeling concepts that are relevant to any version of Blender. And specifically, the takeaway that I want you to get from this is the fine details here. These little intricate curls and patterns, these are really fun to make. So without further ado, let's jump into a brand new scene, File New, and reload the startup file. And here we've got some familiar elements. We've got our default cube, our camera, our lamp, and as usual, I'm going to delete these elements. Well, I'm actually going to leave the cube. Let's delete the camera and lamp though. And for the cube, I really just want to start from one single vertex. So I'm going to select the cube. And speaking of select, I am using left-click select, as I always do in my tutorials. So please be aware of that. And I'm going to tab into edit mode, which is still the same hotkey. Recently, that was returned to that familiar behavior. I'm going to select all the vertices, which mesh element can either be selected up here, vertex, edge, face, or with the 1, 2, and 3 keys above the letters on your keyboard. So that's 1 for vertex, 2 for edge, and 3 for face. For me, that's taken a little bit of getting used to, but select all my vertices and hit Alt-M and merge at the center. All right, so this leaves me with one single vertex, which is what I want to do. It's how I want to start this shield. So I'm going to hit the 1 key on the number pad, which takes me to the front orthographic. Now, this is a little bit different because in past versions of Blender, you had to hit 1 to go into the front view and then 5 to change from perspective to orthographic. But now it's kind of smart enough to realize if I orbit around the viewport, I'm in perspective. And if I hit 1 or 3 or 7, that automatically takes me to the orthographic view. So the devs have saved us a click, and I think that's a smart choice. All right, with this vertex, I'm going to start creating the shape of our shield simply by, extruding out an edge of vertices to create the outline. And I want to add a mirror modifier and turn on clipping. Now, currently in this alpha build, we cannot see the mirror results in edit mode. I'm sure that's going to be implemented before official release, but that is kind of a bummer currently. If I go to object mode there, we can see the other vertex. I'm going to move this to the center. And then using Control and right-clicking for me, I'm going to begin extruding a shape out for this shield. Now I want the bottom to be fairly curved but peaked into a corner at the bottom. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a cutaway here, following a straight edge and then another curved edge at the top. And these are the same hotkeys, transformation, G to move, R to rotate, and S to scale. Let's tab to edit mode and see what we think about the symmetry. And actually, I think this is pretty good. I like this shape. I guess I surprised myself. I wasn't expecting to like it first try, but yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Now that I've got the outline, I want to fill our faces and then hit Control R to cut a new vertex into any of these faces, any of these edges, I'm sorry. All right, just starting to fill these out. Also, currently with 2.8, we're lacking add-ons. I think they're, except for a couple exceptions, they're locked. So, I'm missing my F2 add-on, for example. That's making modeling a little bit slower for me. But, also right there, I used A to select everything, which is the same as it was before. But hitting A again does not toggle it off. It's A to select everything, Alt A to deselect everything. And that one is also fairly difficult to get used to for me. All right, but I'm just gonna, finish filling all these faces. All right, kind of bumbled my way through that one, but we got there eventually. Switching to 2.8, you kind of realize what add-ons you're dependent on or what workflow hotkeys you're dependent on. That's all of a sudden different, but hey, it's going to be worth it. All right, so we've got the shape of our shield established, but now I want to add a decorative edge around the outside. And to do that, I'm going to select everything and hit I. Well, that's one option. I can hit I, as usual, to engage the Inset tool. Now, if I cancel that, over here in the tool panel, this beautiful tool panel with awesome new icons, it works a little bit differently. So here's the Inset option. Now, if I click it, you might think, well, I move my mouse, it should start doing something. That's how it worked in previous versions. But this kind of is just like enabling the tool, right? It's as if there's always a tool enabled, but we have to engage it with the right mouse button, or it's probably left mouse button if you're using right-click select. But with this Inset tool selected and engaged, right-clicking and dragging in the viewport will actually perform the operation. And that is quite different. In fact, actually, I just let go of right-click select and it canceled. So I need to right-click select, hold, and then left-click select to accept the operation. So that is definitely hard to get used to for me. Let's just move those verts over so they're back on the horizon. All right, now with this new edge, let's go to our face select and then Alt-click to select the entire row of faces. And now in 3D, I can extrude. That is actually very, very smooth, I will say, with 2.8. Going from one orthographic and then just middle mouse clicking to orbit goes right into perspective view. That is very smooth. I like that. So I'm going to hit E to extrude forward. And let's see here. I want to create kind of a decoration. So let's see. I'm going to cut an edge right here. Maybe slide that up a little bit. And Control Tab no longer does the mesh element. So you might see me do that quite often because I'm not quite used to the 1, 2, and 3. I don't know that I love that. Or I can just click the button up here. Anyway, this isn't supposed to be a review of Blender 2.8 or anything. It's just... I don't know, it's very fresh, so you might hear me give my thoughts on that stuff. All right, so I have extruded a new, actually that's not really what I wanted. So I want to extrude with this new face, row of faces that I've selected, hit E to extrude, and oh, that's right. So I'm going to cancel that, Alt-S to push it out along the normal. There we go, and you'll see what that does in just a second. And then, let's see, I'm just gonna shape this stuff a little bit more. All right, create this nice decorative edge. And yeah, I think that should be pretty good. Let's go to object mode and hit Control 2. 2 that is above your letters, not on your number pad. And that will add a subdivision surface of 2. All right, so now we're very smooth and we've got a nice decorative edge. But one of the coolest things about Blender 2.8 is the extreme viewport overhaul. So we can make this thing really pretty and we might as well do it. So I'm going to go to this shading option here in the top right. When we click that, we've got a bunch of options. I'm not going to go all of them. They're a lot of fun to play with. I'm just looking for the matte cap that was recently added, very recently added. And I just found out it's from our very own Jonathan Lampel, the metal shiny matte cap. This one is very good for brushed metal type surface effects. So we're going to use that. And in the object menu, we're going to go to Shade Smooth. Now that used to be in the tool panel. Now it's in the object menu. And if at any point you don't know where a tool is, remember that Command F, which I'm on a Mac, so I don't know if it's Control F, brings up the tool search, right? So if I hit, or if I type in Shade Smooth, you'll be able to find that. That's going to really be crucial as you transition to 2.8. So be aware of that option as well if you can't find a tool. All right, so yeah, with that smooth, it looks really good, but I want sharp corners on a few of these. So I need to tab back into edit mode and sharpen these corners. So I'm gonna Shift Alt click on the corners that I want to be sharp, deselect those unnecessary edges, and I'm gonna make these manual since it's at the horizon. But hit Control B to bring up the bevel, just like usual. We'll make it 2 segments and profile at 1. Wow, look at the shading going on up in there. That's looking weird. All right, so with that established, we probably need to clean up the corner. Actually, no. I mean, maybe a super clean modeler would do that, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to leave it as is. It looks fine. And then, let's see, for the middle, I'm going to hit Control R, cut an edge, and then slide these edges all the way to the left. Go to my vertex select, which is hotkey 1, and hit A to select everything. And finally, I'm looking for remove. That's not over here. It looks like maybe mesh or vertex. Yeah, remove doubles. There it is. Awesome. So now we've got a nice tight corner. And, you know, this is tight enough. It's got a little bit shading artifact right there, but that's all right. I'm going to actually create a crossbar now that's going to hide those particular corners. So it's not really a big deal. Tab into edit mode. And, well, object mode. Let's Shift D to duplicate it. Then, okay, so at this point, you know, I would usually go into local view, which we don't quite have local view quite yet, but if I hit Shift H, that will serve to hide everything except whatever objects we have selected. So in this case, this is kind of like a poor man's local view. And I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to create a cross shape. All right, so this is going to be cut down the middle. I'm going to hit SX and 0 to make sure that it's straight. And it doesn't really matter that I'm not, you know, I'm kind of messing up the topology a little bit. All I'm trying to do is use this shield as a base for the geometry and then create the shape, the cross shape that I want. All right, so I like that. Okay, and then I'll actually bring up the delete menu, remove the edge loops, and go to faces. All we want is this right here. All right, Control I to invert and delete faces. Awesome, so we've got a cross shape. If we tab out to object mode, we can see what that looks like smooth. And we've got some work to do right now. It's very interpolated, very smooth, kind of a wishy-washy shape. So Alt-H to unhide everything else. Let's give it some thickness. E to extrude straight out. And then I'm going to stay in face mode, go into 1 orthographic, hit G twice to slide that, and then extrude, rotate. Whoops. There we go. I want it to intersect with. I meant to go to edge mode. Another thing that seems new, as of like the Blender 2.8 version I downloaded today, right before recording, is the face. Usually in face select mode, you had the little squares in between, and it was a way to differentiate between face mode and edge mode. That seems to be gone, and so there's no visual cue that we're in face mode or we're in edge mode, which is I don't know. I think that's kind of a loss. But all right, so we've got this shape of the crossbar started. There we go, and we need to define some harder edge, and I'm going to first in the middle cut a couple edges this way. See what that looks like smooth. Very nice. Let's see, maybe add a couple edges this way. Just looked a little, yeah, that's better. And then let's see, let's get fancy. I'm gonna cut a couple edges in here. And then on this last one, Alt-S to scale out, to push it out. And that's gonna give it a little bit of a decorative edge on the inside too. Yeah, I think that's cool. Whoops, Control Tab, not what I'm looking for. And I just need to move these out a little bit to compensate. There we go. That's looking pretty cool. I just need to clean up the very ends because remember those have a face. That was marquee select, by the way. Control, just like usual, Control for me, right click and drag around to create a marquee selection. And we'll just select those and remove faces. All right, how does that look? Is it intersecting well? Not at the bottom. It is up here, but not at the top either. All right, so we need to, let's see what's going on there. Maybe drag that down and then move this up so that it's intersecting. Beautiful. Same at the bottom. Although this is at an angle, so I need to angle that appropriately. Excellent. All right, so we've got this shape of a flat shield, but ultimately we don't want it to be flat. However, it has been very easy to model in a flat plane because we can just use the front orthographic and not have to worry about any dimensionality to a curved shield. And that's very efficient on our part because now we can simply add a lattice and deform all the pieces of this shield into a nice curve. So I'm going to do that now. Add an object lattice. And it's important to keep this in object mode as you scale and orient the lattice to encapsulate our shield. Let's make sure that the top and bottom bounds and the side bounds are encapsulating the shield. And then from the front, we can, make that skinny. So I want to do this in object mode. And I also do not want to apply these transformations. I want to leave the scale values at whatever values they're at. Same with rotation, location. I just want to leave that all as is. Establish the encapsulation of your lattice in object mode, and then let's increase the resolution. I'm going to go 8 at the U value and then 10 at the W value. All right, so we've got some nice subdivision in there, and at this point we can add a modifier simple deform and a bend modifier in particular. Now I'm looking to bend around the Z axis, and you can see what it's doing here a little bit, but really by itself, that's not going to be what I want. Instead, I'm going to use an empty plane axis. I'm going to move that up a little bit to about here. And now for the lattice modifier, I'm going to use this eyedropper to pick a new origin. So I'm going to pick that empty, and now this is affecting how the lattice is deforming. So this is much better in terms of a result. Now I can select this object, our shield objects, add a lattice modifier, and then just select the only one in the list. You can see that it appropriately curves along with the lattice. Same thing with this one. Add a lattice modifier, lattice. Awesome. So getting that curvature for free or procedurally with the lattice modifier makes our job a lot easier because anything we want to edit, we just do in a flat 2D plane, or, for the most part in a flat 2D plane. Trying to keep everything curved would just be a nightmare if we were doing it manually, especially when we start to add that detail. So it's very wise to set up this with modifiers. And in addition, I actually like the curve value. We can angle it more. I actually like 45, maybe between 45 and 60. I think that's a good value. But I also want to add another simple deform and make that bend in the X direction, also using our empty. Okay, at this point, we've got curvature in both directions, and it gives us this very nice curved shield that we would expect. However, it's a little bit weird looking at the lattice. I think it's kind of hard to visualize. So we can go up to overlays very quickly and disable ornaments. And that's going to take a lot of what I guess I think of as utility visualizations, curves and splines, obviously the lattice, stuff like that. Now that is easier to visualize the shape that we're after, and I think those values are pretty good. At this point, we've got a system established, including the modifiers, that will allow us to create these details in a flat 2D plane and then easily conform them along with the rest of the shield. And to do that, we're going to use curves. So I'm going to select these shield pieces both together. And since they're sharing one lattice modifier, I can hold Alt and click the display modifier and viewport button, and it will disable the lattice modifier for both objects. That's how we can quickly go in and out of the 2D version. And so the curves, we can create that by adding Shift-A curve, and we're going to go with a Bezier curve. Now that's going to be added way down here at the bottom. It's actually, we can't see it because that's one of the ornaments. So let's re-enable ornaments. And at this point, we need to see the ornaments, but I don't want to see the lattice. So let's use our layers, or rather the new collection system. I'm going to select my lattice, hit M, just like I was moving to a different layer. And I have collection 1 or scene collection. I'm going to add a new one, just like adding a new layer. Collection 2, I'm fine with that. And there we go. It's in collection 2, and I can hide that. Now, what's different with 2.8 is all our objects are added to the scene collection by default. I want to think of it more like old Blender style and move my other objects to layer 1, essentially, which is collection 1. And let's see. Actually, they were under collection 1. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting them all to be on the scene collection by default. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Anyway, with everything selected, let's move it to collection 1. And that way my collections can serve as like folders in the scene. And I don't like to have anything just really out there in the scene by itself, not under a folder. So it's organized better, more like old Blender. And I don't see my lattice, but I can see the curve. Now, I'm going to tab into edit mode and just start moving these curves by snapping them to the face, disabling project to self and enabling project elements. That's pretty typical. And I'm going to start moving these and snapping them to the surface of our shield. Oh, I need to enable the magnet icon. Now snapping is enabled. And in the front orthographic, hitting the 1 key on the number pad, we can start to create the designs of our ornamental details. Okay, so using Bézier's is an efficient way to do this because we get very smooth curves and designs with fewer control points. However, so these handles in particular are very important. The normals I don't really need to see so much, which is the little hairy things. Let's just turn that off. And now I'm just looking at the handles and the resulting curve. Now if I go to Z, or if I hit Z to go to wireframe view, maybe this is a little bit more intuitive. Let's see, I think I need another segment. I'm going to select both of these, go to curve, segments, subdivide. Try and keep that fairly straight. And then at the bottom here, we're going to curve it into a nice little hook. And I'm just looking at I'm referencing on the other screen my shield that I used as research for this. So if you're building your own shield, you definitely want to have a reference for this part. I know for me, it's kind of harder to create these designs from my head. It's just, I don't know, it's difficult to do that, to see the bigger hole. I'm just making this really sharp in the corner. But E to extrude, and then we're going to make this also into a nice little hook. And Bézier's can take a little bit of getting used to understand how they work and be able to use them efficiently and fast, quick, and all that. It really doesn't take long. It's just, realizing how the handles affect the way the curve is made. All right, so that looks pretty good. Nice set of curly cues. But this it serves as essentially the path of an extrusion that we're going to make using another curve. So we need to create what's like a profile, like a extrusion for the path. So think of like a pasta maker where you have the template and then you push pasta through it and out comes this extruded shape. That's what we're going to create essentially. So I'm going to do this with another curve, Bezier, tab into edit mode, and I want this to be a triangular shape, and you'll see why, but I kind of have foreknowledge of what this is going to be. So I'm going to add another segment in the middle. I'm going to sharpen that, move it forward in Y. Whoops. So I'm snapping. I want to turn that off. I want it to be linear on the ground, or I want it to be planar on the ground. So S, Z, let's see, we'll use our cursor, S and Z, and now move that point forward in Y. Wow, it's off kilter somehow. SX0. That's not what I want. Let's see, how about my view properties? Let's move that control point 0 in X. There we go, that's more what I want. Back to medium point for my pivot. All right, so I'm creating this triangular shape, and I do want to toggle this element to be cyclic. Okay, so I want to close off this curve. So I'm going to select, actually I don't think selection matters. I'm just going to go to curve, toggle cyclic. There we go. All right, this looks good. Little triangular piece. And now if I select our ornamental curve and go to the curve properties, I'm looking for the bevel options, and I can select that new curve. And also with this version of 2.8, it seems like maybe the dependency graph is a little off, but it doesn't update right away as you would expect. Instead, I need to kind of refresh the setting. So I'm going to check fill caps and just turn that back off because that's not really that important to me. And now we can see the effect where if we scale down our profile object, or our bevel object technically, now we can see what that extrusion looks like along the path. However, it isn't oriented the way I want. So I'm going to select all the control points of my ornamental curve, Control T, which enables the tilt option, and I'm looking for 90 degrees. Okay, there we go. So the shape, the triangle shape has the peak in the middle of our extrusion and then slopes downward as it approaches the surface of the shield. And this is what I want. I'm also going to, I noticed that a couple of my curves were kind of off, so I'm going to select everything, a couple control points, and hit S, Y, and 0. All right, it's going to scale them all perfectly flat so they sit flat against the shield. All right, this looks great, except I also want a curve to control the taper, meaning that I want the ends of our ornamental curve to come to a point and the majority of the extrusion to be the same thickness. And so I'm going to do that with another curve in object mode, Shift A, curve Bezier. And so with this, I'm going to scale one point down, one control point down, so that we have this kind of steep fall off to the curve. And then on the other one, I'm going to try and match it. All right, so I'm going to rotate, there we go, and have a pretty steep fall off. Make sure it's all flat too. There we go. All right, and what this result is, if you can think of this curve as being laid out flat, like this design right here, lay it out flat, that is essentially what we're creating here, where it tapers at the very ends, which when it's curved back into this shape, it's going to be curved just on the curlicues. All right, and it's just 1/2 of the taper because it uses this to like revolve around the entire path. I'm probably just confusing you with this terminology. Remember this shape, steep fall-offs at the ends, but it does come to a point, and then in the middle, it's mostly flat all the way across. So with that in mind, we can choose it as the taper object for our ornamental curve, and it still didn't update. Click Max Taper, and now if we zoom in, we can see that they come to a curve. It come to a point, and it's mostly the same thickness all the way around. However, it is fighting against how small we scaled that first Bezier curve. So let's scale that up till we get a nice thickness that we want. There we go. That is what I'm after. That's the kind of detail that I want, the kind of shape. And now that we've set it up once, we can simply, tab into edit mode on this and start duplicating our shapes around to create everything else. All right, so I'm just going on to create another curlicue shape. And very simply, we've got the system set up to work for us and make our job easier. Let's make this another point. Just extruding around and creating our decorative details. I don't really love that curlicue. Maybe need to add another one here. Curve, segment, subdivide. There we go. And with the system set up, I can simply add the same lattice modifier to this object. And once I enable it for our other objects, Alt-clicking there, you can see that we have our shield and the details are being curved right along with everything else. And it's very nice, very clean, and it's also made our job easier by keeping it in the 2D plane. So let's turn off ornaments one more time. There we go. It's looking really good. And that's essentially it. From now on, it's just repeating this process until I have all of these decorative curves shaped the way I want them. And so I will preview the model, the final model, with the lattice on. And then when I want to edit, I'm just going to Alt-click and turn the lattice off, go back into 2D view, and then continue duplicating and shaping these curves. And that's about it. So I'm going to finish up the video with a time lapse of shaping the rest of the details, but that's really all I have to say, except if you haven't gotten into 2.8, I encourage you to give it a try, even though it's early. Get a head start, have some fun with this lesson, and beyond just what Blender version you're using, again, this workflow of using the curves and the modifiers works with any version of Blender, so it's a relevant technique. And with that said, enjoy the time lapse.